Welcome back, crew. This is the first mate, Matt. Batten down the hatches. We got some more work to do. And as always, got some lime. Keep the scurvy away. As the captain made a mention in a different video, before we can finish a project, we got to start a whole new one. So we were needing to do some canvas work and some sail work. And to do that, we need an industrial sewing machine. But not only do we need an industrial sewing machine, we needed one that could do a zigzag pattern. So behind me, we have a Consew 99. We got this machine at an excellent price, but it's locked up. So we have to figure out why it's locked up, and hopefully we can fix it to make the best of our investment. As you see, it's locked up. So we'll go ahead and look at the bottom end of this and see what we can find. Oh. This thing weighs a ton. Alright, crew, as you see, here's the bottom end, the workings of the sewing machine. And it's kind of hard to see it, but this rod right here, it is moving. This isn't supposed to move right now, but this rod is. I can feel it. But I don't see anything happening in our bottom bobbin holder here. It's not moving at all. So we're going to go ahead and focus on this area. First things first, we'll take off our bobbin and its holder. Usually it's not that bad, but when the machine's on its side, it's a little harder. Get out of there. Come on there. Okay, we'll put that over here. I'm going to take off this piece. Next thing we'll do, we're going to take off the bobbin holder assembly. It's held on by 3 set screws at the bottom. Okay. And there's one on the top. We'll have to flip the machine back up to get to. Next we'll have to take out the bottom here. These are typically known as the dog teeth. You'll have to raise the presser foot. Pop the machine up slightly. Next we'll pull this out. And plate will come out. Here it is. The last set screw. You can see it right just barely down there. We'll screw that out. We don't have to take them out completely, we just have to loosen them. Now that we got that, we'll go ahead and flip her back over. Now that's off, we'll go ahead and get this out of here. Kind of pull up on it. Give it a little wiggle. Those are the 3 set screws. We'll go ahead and take off this cover here. Okay, as you can see, this gear right here is moving. But this one is not moving at all. So somewhere in this area is where our problem lies. I'm going to speculate that this shaft here is seized in this housing. These set screws here then the one below it hold the bushings in. Went ahead and loosened set screws on this gear here, and as you see, spins. Definitely the shaft that is seized up. A lot of sticky like tar substance all in here. Probably need to get that out of there. That might be keeping it bound up. Very reliable machines. They came from Japan, and they still make something similar to this model even after all these years. Now that we took off that gear, we can see that the machine spins freely now. It's very smooth now. There's no drag, everything moves up. The bottom dog teeth plate moves like it's supposed to. The shaft is held without moving up and down, as the gear holds it from going downwards this way. This black collar keeps it from going the other way. Before we take the shaft out here, it is flush at the bottom here. We'll still make sure that we put in this exact same spot. You need to loosen the 2 screws on the collar. Now that that collar is loose, we should be able to get the shaft out now. We'll go ahead and take this gear off again. Okay. Now that our gear is off, we'll go ahead and grab a soft hammer. Take it out. The shaft is being a little difficult. We're gonna put the sewing machine head and put it on the workbench. So to take the machine off, we would pull it back, and then once it's back almost all the way, we'll just pick straight up, and that's all it takes to get that off. It's heavy though. Oh, Jesus. That's the bottom of the shaft. It's a very good point to where we could use a soft hammer or a brass punch to push the shaft through so we can clean it. Alright crew, I've already moved it a little bit. I didn't have a brass punch, which I would prefer, but I went with one that's smaller than the OD of the shaft to ensure that I'm not hitting on the outside and causing a burr. Here's our shaft. Looks a little bit, got some corrosion here, or gunk. We'll go ahead and clean this up. We'll also clean up the bushings to ensure a smooth rotating machine. Now we got the shaft out, and it's looking pretty good. And at least it's easy on this shaft to know which way it went where, because one side still has paint on it. So we'll go ahead and put it in. Look at that. Look at that shaft now. Nice and smooth. We'll probably go ahead and clean with a little brake clean. Maybe a brass brush from a gun cleaning kit would work pretty well. 30. Brass brush seems like it'll fit pretty good in there. Or a nylon. I don't want to mess up this bushing. There we go, crew. We have cleaned up pretty decent. That tar stuff is a pain to get off. Brake clean barely touches it. But we got her looking pretty decent. So next thing we'll do, we'll blow it out. These industrial sewing machines require the use of oil, and most of them have oil ports. Some even have an automatic oiler and a reservoir down in the tray underneath the sewing head. This one will have to do it manually. Alright, crew, we went in and took the top off the sewing machine here, and I've already cleaned it. Once again, it was filled with that tar like gunk, old grease and grime. As you see now, everything's moving smoothly. On the top of the sewing machine lid here, we have oil ports. There are, I'd say, a dozen of them on this machine. So when we take it off, we'll see that it has ports to the bearings underneath. Like right here, the oil would go from one side to the other. It is divoted in to hold and catch the oil so it can get into the bearing. Same as the one over here. One right there, one on the other side. The oiling they recommend every 8 hours. They also recommend that you should use your machine, or at least run it once a month, to keep everything freed and moving. Alright, crew, I'm going to go ahead and blow all the ports out. We're going to be using two different types of lubrication products. First, it would be a mineral oil. This is what they recommend for sewing machines. Next, for the big gears here, and then one on the bottom, we're using a grease designed for sewing machines. During the video, we used a product called Consew Retro sewing grease. This product is not the most ideal for this particular machine. It has a very low melting point, particularly used on the Singer Featherlight sewing machine, particularly for the motor that uses a felt lubrication system. So you grease it, it's absorbed into the felt, and then as the machine warms up, it would kind of melt and then continuously lubricate the machine. This is an industrial machine. It's going to be working a lot harder, a lot thicker fabrics, so we need a grease that is more suited for this type. The grease that we're going to be going with is called Tri-Flow. Many people in the sewing industry rave about it. It has a thicker consistency, so it'll stay on the gears a lot better. So instead of reshooting all the video, the concept is still the same of application. You would still put it on the gears, wipe off the extra. Just know going forward that we will be using the Tri-Flow when we grease the machine in the future. Since this is our first time oiling it after taking all the grease and grime out, we're going to put it on heavily, and then in the future when we re-oil it, we'll just use a drop or two. Like I said, there are a large amount of oil ports that need to be oiled. When we get done oiling this machine, we'll go ahead and wipe off the extra oil and grease. They recommend doing it with your finger so you don't introduce any lint or fibers into the gear train. Typically, we would just oil it through the ports on the top. Also ports on the machine itself in various places. There's ports that run through from the top so you can oil it. But as we said before, since it's the initial oiling, we'll go ahead and visually do it to get every spot that moves really well. The gears, we will do with the grease. And some of the oiling spots can only be accessed through the oiler ports. And as we said before, we didn't really want to use a towel, but out here on the outside, it won't hurt nothing. Alright crew, it's time to put the grease onto the gears. Alright crew, probably a little excessive, so we'll use our finger, kind of wipe away the excess grease there. Once again, we do this so we don't introduce any lint fibers into this drivetrain. Word of caution is be very careful, because this will easily pinch your finger. Once again, we'll apply some grease. And we have more gear train down at the bottom of the machine. Something I forgot, we got to put on our gear case protector. Yes. Once we get it in there, alright, on the side of the machine there's an access port to get to that screw. And just have to finagle it in there. If only we had 3 hands, huh? It still leaves a way for you to add grease to it without having to take that off every time. If you see the gear down there. Next we'll put our little cover back on. Looks like someone prior to me stripped that screw out. Go ahead and put some grease here. And we just have one more gear to grease up, but we have to put it on first. For that, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the table. We got this sewing machine head back on the table. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put on the other gear guard here. And last, we're going to put our shaft back in with our gear on this piece This screw here is so you can put grease into the gears without having to take this whole elbow piece off. Don't need to be super tight, just snug. Kind of center it onto the gear because it does wiggle a little bit. Time to put the shaft and the gear back onto the machine. Here's our shaft. Go ahead and put just a smidge of oil on here. Now down here there's a little bitty retainer that we're gonna have to fish back over to the shaft. Paint side goes down. And the shaft flush with the bottom of this bushing under here. On this bottom collar, we need to push it up on the shaft. The top gear stops it from going down, and this bottom collar stops it from moving this way, so we keep a nice tight contact with this gear. We also have to make note and make sure we get a set screw onto the flat part of this shaft. We went ahead and we turned the set screw so it's facing us. You can just barely see the head of it right there. That'll make it a little easier for us to index that. And the flat facing forward. Alright, once we got on, we're going to go ahead and tighten the set screw up a little bit so it kind of catches that flat area. It'll still be a little loose until we get it adjusted, but it'll stay within that cutout piece of the shaft.
Shaft is flush with the bottom.
You see it stops it from going up any higher, but it still drops down because the top gear stops that motion. I think we got it where we want it, so we'll go ahead and tighten these down. Unfortunately, collar was upside down, so the screw was really far up here and it was hard to get to tighten. So I had to move it over to this little area over here, use the 2 screwdrivers, flip it over and shuffle it back onto the bushing there. So once again, we'll put the set screw forward, match it with the face here, and we'll tighten it up. Now it'll be time to put the top gear on. Put a flat face. Check for operation. As we did before. And put some grease on it. Sewing machines have to be timed. A lot of things have to happen at very precise moments. So if you have a sewing machine that's out of time, it'll start missing threads and you'll have poor performance. Crew, it's now time for us to time the sewing hook mechanism that we removed to get that shaft off. And that is set with these set screws, as you would turn it when the needle is at its furthest down area is when we time it. First thing we need to do, we need to set the machine to its lowest point by turning the hand wheel towards us. Okay, now that it's at its lowest point, we need to raise the needle up by 3/32. I found a feeler gauge and I put on to 3/32 about 0.092. Take the presser foot off to get close enough to make that measurement. What I've see that will work pretty decent. The bottom of our feeler gauge is at the bottom of this little piece right here. Put our thing right there. Raise the needle up by turning the hand wheel towards us. So now we'll have to flip the machine back over. Crew, now that we have the needle set where we need to, we'll go ahead and put our sew hook on. Crew, we had to put this on before we did the needle, so I'm going to go ahead and remeasure it. Now that our needle is at the right height and we got this pretty close. Now the tip of the sewing hook here needs to be right in the middle of the needle, right there. You might need some adjustment. This isn't a new needle. They recommend using a newer needle, just probably make sure it's not bent or nothing, but this will get us into the ballpark. Then we will tighten these set screws at the bottom here. Then we'll spin the machine a couple times and double check to make sure it stayed in time. So went ahead and put it back together. Put the cover on, the black holder this time so you could see how it's supposed to be. So we're going to go ahead and spin it a few times. Last thing will be to test it a few more times by hand. Then we'll go ahead and thread the machine, see how it performs. Once we hand thread some fabrics and everything is good, we will use the machine's motor to run some stitching. We about got her done. We are at the last stage, and that is to test this machine out, make sure it does a good stitch. We got two different colors here so we can easily tell how it's doing. But to do that, first we need to wind the bobbins. And that's what this thing over here is for. This thread winder. So we put our bobbin in over here. There we go. First we'll turn the machine on. This type of machine uses a clutch motor. So the motor is always spinning and the pedal down here at the floor engages a clutch. So now that we got it wound, we'll push this lever, engages this pulley. It should spin our bobbin and wind up some thread. It's probably good enough. We're just doing a little test. So we'll disengage it. Crew, we got our machine threaded. But the best that we could do, because we're missing a few components. Now, I'm not going to show you how to thread the machine because I had to go on YouTube myself to learn how to thread this machine. I watched a video by Alexander Dyer. It was a good video on how to thread the machine, and if you're curious on how to do it, I suggest you check out that video. Go ahead and put our piece of test fabric in here, and we're going to do some stitching by turn the sewing machine by hand to make sure that there are no parts that are going to bind up. We got our presser foot down, Let's go ahead and see what happens. Looks pretty good. Then we'll, after we get done with this run, we'll check our stitching. Pretty easy to turn by hand, and it feels pretty smooth. When a sewing machine misses stitching, or stitches, it's most apparent at its widest zigzag setting, if the machine does have one. And run our machine backwards to lock the stitch. Lift our presser foot up. Kind of wiggle it to get the thread out. And there we go. I also recommend bring down your good pair of scissors. Tin snips are not the best choice. There we go. The stitching looks pretty good. Could probably use a little adjusting on the thread tension and such, but it's not too bad. Let's go ahead and see how this machine does with the motor power. Put our test piece in. We'll go ahead and turn the machine on. Now these clutches are a little bit finicky, so it takes a little bit of time to get the finesse down. And I do not have the finesse. That looked pretty good. So we can go ahead and try a zigzag out. We'll go to our widest zigzag, put our piece back in, turn our machine on, and let's try a zigzag out. Whoops, a little too much there. Unfortunately, our machine has missed a stitch, or two actually. That would be possible timings not quite right, or maybe some little adjustments, some tensions are off. Also, as you can see, you might not be able to see it very well. You see the white thread? Well, the white thread should not be seen on this side. So somewhere my thread tension is off. Okay. Went through 3 layers like nothing. We'll unfold it one more time, see if we can do it. Trying to get a lot of thread. Okay. This machine has quite a large area underneath the presser foot. So that's 6 layers right there. 6 layers. Crew, I think we got a success. Our bargain price Consew 99 sewing machine that we bought that was locked up turned out to be a good purchase. Wasn't sure what was going on at first, but we were able to find the problem and easily fix it with just some simple maintenance. Our machine still needs some adjustments, maybe a little bit better on the timing, thread tensions, but we have a winner. Soon, once we get these little bugs lined out, we'll be fixing our sacrificial jib cloth and doing some canvas work for the bimini top, some of the covers that protect the expensive components on a boat. I'd like to thank you for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, would like to see more about this, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Here's to keeping the scurvy away.